You need some rest. You need to go home.
Good evening. I call this meeting of the Johnson City Board of Commissioners for April 19th, 2018 to order. If everybody would rise for the invocation by Dr. Tommy Hood, Senior Pastor at Central Baptist Church, and then remain standing for the pledge.
Thank you for the invitation to come and pray this evening. It's an honor to be here. Let's pray. Gracious God, we give thanks for your many blessings, but tonight we thank you especially for the freedom that we have as citizens to govern ourselves through representatives like these on the City Commission. Your word reminds us of our responsibility to submit to the governing authorities because, as the Bible says, they are servants of yours, ministers of God to us for good. So we pray for these commissioners, Lord, that they may have the necessary wisdom to make good decisions that serve to uphold justice, preserve order, and advance the common good. In this divided and partisan age, may we all endeavor to treat one another with courtesy and respect, doing unto others as we would have others do unto us, just as you have taught us. All this we ask in the name of the one who is the way, the truth, and the life, Jesus the Christ. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Dr. Hood. Mr. Peterson?
Your first order of business is consideration of the minutes from your meeting held on Thursday, April the 5th.
Are there any corrections, edits, comments on the minutes?
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second. Any more discussion? Ms. Jennings, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Dunbar?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock?
Yes.
Mayor Tumita?
Yes.
This time we'd like to welcome the Science Hill Wrestling State Champions to come forward and to be recognized and receive a proclamation.
Hey guys, take him down.
One of my good friends.
I'll give you 20.
Runner-up in the state at 132. It wasn't very big. If I can get this, wrestle this microphone away. Guys, we are so proud of you. I was talking to your coach out front, and wrestling sometimes flies under the radar a little bit. That's okay. You guys know that. You embrace it. You work through it. But man, we're so proud of you, all of us here. We watched you. We cheered for you, and we appreciate it. Appreciate you coming by tonight. So, whereas the 2018 Science Hill High School boys wrestling team was led by head coach Jimmy Miller and assistant coaches Caleb Myers, Victoria Myers, Jeff Price, and Landon Reed. And whereas the selfless group of wrestlers always put the team before their individual goals, and in doing so, finished their season as AAA runner-up. And whereas two Science Hill High School wrestlers won the AAA state championship at their weight class. And whereas senior Luke Story finished the season with a 62-3 record and a state champion at the 138 weight class. And whereas junior got another year, right? Chase Deal finished his season with a 56-3 record and state champion at the 160-pound weight class. Now therefore I, David Tumita, Mayor of the City of Johnson City, Tennessee, do hereby congratulate 2018 state wrestling champions Luke Story and Chase Deal and commend them on a remarkable season that not only demonstrated their skill and athleticism, but showed us all how putting a common goal above ourselves can generate extraordinary results. Congratulations. We got two of them.
Coach Miller should come up there.
There you go.
Thank you.
Coach Miller, come up and get in the picture up here.
If you'd like to say a few words before they take pictures.
I just want to thank David for having us here tonight. Just very appreciative for the recognition for our hard work and our young men and all the dedication and time that our program keeps churning out. Thank you.
And just introduce yourself for people who don't know.
Luke Story.
Chase Deal.
I think that's all the proclamations for tonight. Do I have a motion to move the United Way volunteer?
Next item on your agenda is proclamation recognizing Volunteer Appreciation Week.
Just kidding.
Thank you.
Sort of. Yeah. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening, sir. All right.
It's always a risk.
Well, we appreciate you coming again. We sure got used to seeing you. We hopefully see you next Monday. All right. Yeah. But we're going to kick off Volunteer Appreciation Week, and no better representatives for volunteerism than the three folks we have standing here who will introduce themselves here shortly. Whereas National Volunteer Week has been celebrated annually since President Richard Nixon signed an executive order in 1974 establishing the event, and whereas National Volunteer Week honors the individuals who dedicate themselves to taking action and solving problems in their communities and proves that one person serving another can inspire, empower, equip, and mobilize others to bring about positive change. And whereas volunteers who are the backbone of our region's human service agencies can connect with local community service opportunities through hundreds of service organizations like the Hands-On Network, Action Centers, and Volunteer Centers. And whereas consisting of more than 62.8 million people, our country's volunteer force is a great treasure and is vital to our future as a caring and productive nation. And whereas during this week throughout our region and nation, volunteers will participate in service projects and will be recognized for dedicating their time and talents to make a difference. Now therefore I, David Tomita, Mayor of the City of Johnson City, Tennessee, do hereby proclaim April 15th through 21st Volunteer Appreciation Week in Johnson City, Tennessee, and urge my fellow citizens to join in as we celebrate the year's theme, Celebrate Service, by volunteering in our community and recognizing those who serve. It is through the service of volunteering that we can displace disconnection with understanding and compassion. And there you are, Kristen.
Yeah, I'm Kristen Jennings. I'm the new president and CEO for United Way of Washington County, Tennessee. And just thank you all so much for your help and support for United Way. And if you don't help or support United Way, I would be happy to connect you with an agency that you can volunteer with.
Good evening. I'm Howie Claire Tong, the area director of the Girl Scouts here in Johnson City. And we are so thankful to be a United Way agency partner and so thankful for our Girl Scout volunteers here in the crowd tonight.
I'm Gary McAllister. I'm this year's campaign chair for the United Way, and we just appreciate the community so much and all volunteers here who help us so much, especially the commissioners who I know are going to be very helpful and considerate and very nice during the campaign. Since I know every one of you, and I know your numbers, so thank you.
Who brought the hat? We're supposed to pass the hat. So, all right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Your next order of business is consideration of a temporary occasion license for the Johnson City Brewing Company to sell beer at the food truck rally at the mall on May the 12th, 2018. The appropriate reviews have been made, finding no disqualifying factors, and we would recommend your approval.
All right. Would you state your name and address for the record, please?
Catherine Latham, 603 West Poplar Street, Johnson City, Tennessee, 37604.
And have you, sorry, I'll wait till you're finished. And have you read the rules and regulations regarding the sale of beer in the city of Johnson City?
I have.
Do you agree to abide by those rules?
I do.
Do you have any questions for us?
I don't.
Do we have any questions for the applicant?
Move approval.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Ms. Jennings, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Ballard?
Yes.
Commissioner Benbrock?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock?
Yes.
Mayor Tomita?
Yes. And if you'd like to take a minute, tell us about your event.
Sure. Well, actually, we're all excited. This is the first time the food truck rallies out at the mall have been able to partner with a brewery in the area. So this will be a sort of first-time experiment and see how it goes. And so we're just excited to be the first ones on the docket there.
Very good. Good luck.
Next order of business is consideration of a certificate of compliance for Philip Sharfstein, Appalachian Basin Assets, doing business as One Stop Wine and Spirits, located at 2710 North Run Street. No disqualifying factors have been found. We would recommend your approval.
Do we have a motion?
Move approval.
Motion, how about a second?
Second.
Motion and a second, any discussion? Ms. Jennings, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Van Brocklin?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock?
Yes.
Mayor Temita?
Yes.
And your next order of business is a certificate of compliance for Christine Wheatley, Kroger number 261, located at 112 Sunset Drive. The appropriate reviews having been made, finding no disqualifying factors, the recommendation is for approval.
Very good.
Move for approval.
Motion, how about a second?
Second.
Motion and a second, any further discussion? Ms. Jennings, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Brocklin? Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock?
Yes.
Mayor Temita?
Yes.
Next is a consideration of a certificate of compliance for Christine Wheatley, Kroger number 367, located at 1805 West State of Franklin Road. The appropriate reviews having been made, finding no disqualifying factors, the recommendation is for approval.
Any discussion? How about a motion?
Move approval.
How about a second? A motion and a second, any further discussion? Ms. Jennings, call the roll.
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Brocklin? Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock?
Yes.
Mayor Temita?
Yes.
Next is consideration of a beer license application for Vintage One LLC, doing business as Hampton Inn, located at 508 North State of Franklin. This is for a Class II on-premise beer license. The appropriate reviews have been made, finding no disqualifying factors. The recommendation is for your approval.
Very good. Is the applicant here tonight? Okay. Come up, please. Give your name and address for the record.
My name is Kyle St. Clair, and the address is 508 North State of Franklin Road.
Have you read the rules and regulations regarding the sale of beer in the city of Johnson City?
I have, yes, sir.
Do you agree to abide by those rules?
Yes, sir, we do.
Do you have any questions for us?
Not at the moment, no,
Do you
sir.
have any questions for the applicant? Move for approval. Have a motion. How about a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Ms. Jennings, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Brocklin?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock?
Yes.
Mayor Temita?
Yes. Thank you.
Next order of business is to make appointments to the Johnson City Senior Foundation Board. This will be for 3 appointments. You have 3 applicants, those being Ted Eads, Jeff Johnson, and Braxton Smith.
Good evening.
Good evening. Good to see y'all. It's been a few hours.
Well, very good. How do we want to handle this? Anybody like to?
I'll make a
Make a
motion that
picture.
we accept the recommendations from the Foundation Board of Mr. Eads, Mr. Johnson, and Mr. Smith.
Very good.
I would second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? No? Ms. Jennings, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Brocklin? Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock?
Yes.
Mayor Temita?
Yes. Thank you.
Why don't you tell us a little
Yeah.
bit about what the foundation is up to these days? We haven't got a report from you in a while.
Right now, we're working on a secret fundraiser that we haven't let anybody know about yet.
Didn't even ask.
Because, but we
You
do
know
have
we're
some.
televised, right? 'Cause, like, the
Yeah, I
secret's
know,
out.
but
Okay.
I didn't actually name it, so we're not going to tell you what that is at the moment. But it's something new to the area that has never been done here. So it's going to be something quite fun and entertaining. We also have some major donor appeals going out and working on some new fundraisers. So more things to come, and always working on the Christmas boxes and finding new ways to support our seniors.
That's great. What'd you say the fundraiser was?
I'm not telling you, David.
Okay.
Well, we
Good
want
try.
to thank the Foundation Board
Yeah.
for all the work that you do.
Thank you
It's
so
just really
much.
great, and
Thank you.
being at the luncheon today and seeing everybody there, I mean, it's a very cohesive group there.
Yes, thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Get some rest. Tax
Thank you.
day's over, right?
Your next order of business is consideration of street closures, the first being a request from the Atlantic Ale House to accommodate a beer craft event to be held on Saturday, April the 21st. They're asking that a portion of McClure Street be closed from 10 a.m. until 11:30 p.m. The reviews have been made and the recommendation is for approval.
Like to give your name and address for the
Jacob
record?
Breed, 218 West Holston, Johnson City.
Do we have any questions?
Yeah, how will you handle the traffic in light of the street being closed?
It's going to be a tough one. I think I'm going to detour them.
Yeah, I know. It'll be tricky. A lot
It will
of
be
people
very
rely
tricky.
on it.
Just
Okay.
don't send them out across the new park.
Yeah, try not to.
And hopefully it will not snow on April 21st.
Hopefully not.
But it could.
It could. You never know. It is East Tennessee. All right. Any other questions? How about a motion?
Move for approval?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Ms. Jennings, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Fowler,
Yes.
Commissioner Van Brocklin, Commissioner Wise.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock.
Yes.
Mayor Temita.
Yes.
Your next request is from, I'm sorry.
Tell us
Tell me
about
about your
it.
event. I'm sorry, I
We have
apologize.
tens of people watching. Would you like to tell us?
This is our
tell us
fourth annual
about it?
block party that we're having, and we're celebrating good friends, good times, and good beer. So, well, it'll be a good time.
And King Commons.
And King Commons, absolutely. So, it should be a fun time.
Thanks.
Thanks. Good luck.
Your next request is from Umoja Arts and Culture to accommodate their annual music and arts festival be held on Friday, September the 7th and Saturday, September the 8th. The festival hours will be from 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. on Friday and Saturday. We have made the appropriate reviews and are recommending approval of the street closures as requested.
Very good. Is the applicant here? I guess by default. That's okay. You can, we can handle it from here. And we know who you are.
Move approval.
Okay.
Second.
All right. Have a motion and a second. Any further questions for the applicant?
We need a little more leg room in the seats if we expect people to get out.
Thank you. Can we stay on topic, please? No.
Yeah.
Do I have a motion?
Move for approval. I made a motion.
Okay.
We
Do
did,
we have
in a second.
All right.
Second.
Yeah.
I need to pay attention. don't I?
You did. You did.
All right, Ms. Jennings, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Fowler.
Yes.
Commissioner Van Brocklin.
Yes.
Commissioner Wise.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock.
Yes.
Mayor Temita.
Yes.
And your next request is from Umoja to accommodate their annual parade to be held this year on Saturday, September the 8th. The street closures are between the hours of 8 a.m. and 11 a.m. on Saturday, September the 8th. The appropriate reviews having been made, and the recommendation is for approval of the request.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Ms. Jennings, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Fowler.
Yes.
Commissioner Van Brocklin. Commissioner Wise.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock.
Yes.
Mayor Temita.
Yes.
Captain, you're good. I've never seen one pass that quickly.
But you'll never get out of there.
That's right. Sorry, you got to
You're in
stay.
for the rest of the meeting.
Your next order of business is consideration of the consent agenda.
Okay, to my right to left, Commissioner Wise, anything you'd like to pull for individual discussion?
No, sir.
Okay, Commissioner Van Brocklin.
No, but thank you.
Vice Mayor Brock.
Mr. Peterson, just B11, just an update on the tank up on Tannery Knobs. I was asked a question the other day about a lot of the traffic that's parked on Chamber Road there and what's going on, so maybe you
Yes,
can
ma'am.
just give us a real quick update.
The tank is under construction. They've got the floor of the new tank is poured. They're receiving forms and probably this week started setting forms in order to erect the sides. Chamber Drive is closed from just beyond the Chamber of Commerce building the rest of the way up the hill. Due to the very limited space up there, there's not room for the employees of the construction company to park up there, so they're parking in the closed portion of Chamber Drive. That project should terminate sometime late summer, Tom. I think late summer, early fall, they should be out of there and completed. And I've, to this point, I'm gonna jinx us, Tom. I've been very impressed with the effort that they have put forth to keep that moving quickly.
Great. It's going to be winter or spring of 2020 now that you said that.
No, let's hope not. They're doing a good job so far.
Good. All right. You good, Vice Mayor? Commissioner Fowler?
None.
Okay. Do I have a motion to accept the consent agenda?
Move for approval.
Okay, do I have a motion? How about a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Ms. Jennings, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Fowler.
Yes.
Commissioner Van Brocklin.
Yes.
Commissioner Wise.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock.
Yes.
Mayor Tomita.
Yes.
Okay, at this time, I would like to present the manager's report, and I've asked a couple of our staff members to give us some detailed information. Ms. Jennings, if you could walk us through the March financials. While Janet's coming down, I would remind you that March financials include actual sales tax collections through the month of February. Okay, so we're, okay. So there is a lag there. We are sitting where we need to be. Revenues are on target and expenditures are a little under what we budgeted. So Janet, if you would, please, ma'am.
Okay, I actually have a PowerPoint.
Wait. It's this one. Just on this one tab.
I thought that link there was to the PowerPoint, but it was actually to the financials. Give me just 1 second. All right, there we go. There's a different link. This is going to be a little more readable than trying to read the financials on the screen. As the city manager said, this is the financials for the 9 months so far through the fiscal year. Before we start through that, I would like to let everyone know at home that the city is pleased to announce that we've been upgraded in our credit rating with Standard & Poor's from a AA- to a AA. So we're very excited to hear that news this week. That gives us, we already had 3 AA ratings, but this raises it from a AA- to a solid AA. We also have a AA with Fitch. We have a AA2 with Moody's. So that just is an extra, endorsement by the credit rating agencies that the city of Johnson City is on sound and stable financial standing. So we're happy to report that to you. As far as the March financials, I'm going to start with the general fund and just hit some highlights. In front of you, you do have some key financial statistics that might go into a bit more detail. You also have the full financial package that goes into a lot of detail, but I'm going to hit the high points. So property tax collections are 40% of our general fund budget, so it's quite significant. So anytime we look at how the city's growing, we look at property tax and assessment growth. And we have, over the past few years, we have enjoyed an average growth of about 1.5% in our assessments. I'm happy to say that our net billings are up 1.64%. Our collections are up even better than that, so we are experiencing very healthy collections through this point of the year. Usually, as of the end of June, we've collected about 97 to 97.5% of our current year billings. We're already at 97.14%. So just to say that property tax collections are extremely strong and healthy, and we appreciate everyone getting those bills paid on time. Collections are $588,000 above where we were last year. Of course, we count on that growth in the budget. The budget division did budget those up $336,000, so you can see that we're at a really good cushion there. Sales tax is our second primary revenue source in the general fund. Those comprise 24% of that budget. On our February retail sales, we were up $98,000 or 6.57%. I think the last time we reported that to you, we had a little bit of less than favorable news, I'll say, on Christmas sales. There are probably a couple of things that contributed to that. But we're happy to say that for January and especially February, we seem to be back on track. February showing a lot of strength. Year-to-date through February, we were up $337,000 as compared to last year. That's 2.41% growth. That's very healthy growth. We are practically at budget. We're just $13,000 short of budget through the first 9 months of the year. Actually, it's 8 months of retail activity, so we have 4 months of retail activity left to report because there is that lag. As far as the reserves, we're always interested to see how the reserves are in the general fund. We have been able to maintain for a number of years our 2-month rainy day reserve, but we do have a couple of other reserves that are of importance. One being the additional 2% hotel occupancy tax. That reserve is currently sitting at $381,000. We do have an additional debt service payment. The Fine Arts Center payment is coming out of that reserve, so we would expect that to end the year around $150,000. The Economic Development Reserve is growing. That has been very useful in doing some various projects around town. That stands at $2.1 million. We expect that to finish the year very close to that. We have one more payment to make from that reserve, so we should end about $2 million. I'm happy to say that in reviewing the revenues of the general fund, all the other revenues in addition to property tax and sales tax, those are all on track to meet budget or exceed budget, so we're happy to report that. The various departments are continuing to exercise good expenditure controls, so we expect expenditures to come in at or under budget. Traditionally, they come in under budget, but I don't want to overpromise something for them at this point. As far as the golf fund, through 9 months, revenues are down $35,000. The deficit has improved by $3,000, but I can't give you that news without saying that last year we did have a $69,000 hit for the fire damage that we don't have this year. So I would probably have expected that deficit to be $66,000 better, in all fairness. So depreciation is up $33,000, so that is impacted by the capital improvements that have been put in place in the golf courses. The golf course now, one golf course though. The other utility funds, and these are the primary ones that we talk about, solid waste, water, sewer, and stormwater. Just to hit the highlights, all 3 funds are in a great position. They have great reserves. They are still reporting healthy profits. You will see from the slide that all 3 funds are showing lower profit than last year, but they're still at very healthy profits, so I wouldn't be concerned at all about those. Finally, the insurance fund. This was put in place a number of years ago to combat the ever-increasing cost of health insurance, and as you can see, it's been very successful in helping us to have monies to cover the employees' health costs. The city and schools reserves are in this fund, so the breakdown would be that the city has a total of $7.7 million in this fund. $5.1 million of that is totally unrestricted, unreserved. The credit, I will tell you that the additional $2.6 million that we've set aside deliberately to cover the retiree health insurance cost are viewed by the credit rating agencies as available funds in the event of dire circumstances or an emergency. So that has played in our favor. The schools are, for the year, the schools are showing a $230,000 deficit. They still have $5.5 million of unrestricted funds. So I would not be concerned about a dip in any particular year. We've added a lot of reserves to this fund over the years. So you would expect to be able to weather a year or two or three of bad experience and bad losses on insurance claims and still be okay. Total fund balance, $13.2 million when you add city and schools. And that is the conclusion of the highlights. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Ms. Jennings, could you speak to, when you talked about healthy profits in the utility funds, we're obviously a government entity, and so our primary objective is not profitability. How do the profits in the utility funds transfer through to some practical application?
A good portion of those profits have already been rolled back into capital improvements. For example, the water sewer system, if you looked at their cash flow statement, you will not see the same level of reserves. A lot of that is underground. A lot of that's been invested in the infrastructure. So you're correct. We do not just set aside these large sums of profits.
Just another example, Commissioner. We replace our solid waste equipment on a cash basis. So you will see the cash reserves in the solid waste accounts peak and valley as we do equipment replacement. We're coming up on a couple of years that we'll make some pretty significant equipment replacements.
That garbage truck that picks the dumpster up in front of your house, what does it cost to buy one of those?
It's filling the room. Garbage truck, give or take 20%, is probably $250,000.
We need a little bit of profit to pick up the trash.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir. To replace the entire fleet, if I remember correctly, is somewhere in the neighborhood of $4 million. Is that about right?
But we still have to do a lot of infrastructure investment by debting as well, but we pay for a lot what we can on a cash basis.
Yes. We are fortunate that in solid waste we can do it on a cash basis. That's probably the only fund that we have that luxury. We have set up the general fund as well as our utility funds to have what Tom in the water sewer refers to as rate-funded capital, and in the general fund, what we call capital on a cash basis. We do as much as we can on a cash basis, and then from that point on, we would have to issue debt. We typically reserve the issuance of debt for things that have a lifespan of 15 or 20 years or greater.
We pay cash for our school buses, correct?
We do pay cash for our school buses, our police cars, some fire trucks, a ladder truck's $1 million plus. So we debt service those for 7 years. So when we do have to finance things, we finance them for as short a time as we can possibly do. And of course, there's accounting guidelines in the comptroller's office that have an absolute minimum on how long you can finance things for. And
that seemingly mundane detail of the AA rating means we borrow for less money than we did before.
Yes, sir. Yes. That is a very significant piece of what we do, and the interest expense savings can add up to millions of dollars, literally, by keeping a good credit rating and timing the issuance of debt. I know when the economy was in its most recessed point, interest rates were very, very cheap, and construction prices were probably 65, 70 cents on the dollar to what they were previously and what they are now. We did a lot of construction. We probably did $75 million worth of construction during the recession because we were in a cash position to be able to handle the debt service payments and borrow for 1/4%, 0.5% on a 20-year bond. And so you had construction cost savings coupled with interest cost savings. And it's, timing and good credit means a lot to you and a lot of dollars over the long run.
For a few years, that was the difference between balancing the budget.
Very much so.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Those interest rate savings, so they've worked in our favor. Stormwater, I was going to mention stormwater. We carry about $2 million of cash in there, but that's another fund you'll see when we do a project that we cash fund. We'll pull from that as well. So we started that improvement program with bond money, but we've been able to cash fund a lot of the subsequent improvements. So, anything else?
Thank you.
Thanks.
And next,
Well, let me just, I would be remiss if we have a room of people, in addition to the 10 people watching, that please note the second largest source of revenue for your city is sales tax. Online sales hampers that. So shop local. Not only do you help your local government, you help your local neighbors who are operating businesses here. It's important, more important now than ever, as you see the Kmarts of the world and the Sears and the Toys R Us's of the world. The reason they're closing is because we're not buying our stuff in their stores. We're buying it online and to duck the sales tax. So the result of that is another tax goes up. So pay extra, help your neighbors, help your city. End of sermon.
Mayor, I'll just add on to that too. One of the primary funding sources of our schools, K through 12 schools, is sales tax. So we're directly impacting that, when we don't shop locally.
all right, at this time, I'd like to ask Becky Haas to come up. As you all probably remember, we've had a homelessness task force put together in some form or another now for probably 3 to 5 years. And Becky has taken this and has been working very diligently with a number of different organizations and individuals. I'd like to ask her to give us an update on her work and some of the opportunities we have found. So please.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners.
Good evening.
I'm going to just really be very, very brief here. The Homeless Task Force has been in existence, as Mr. Peterson said, 3 or more years. The mission of this task force is to reduce the numbers, mitigate the impact, and improve outcomes for people who experience homelessness in Johnson City. Currently, this is being led by myself at the Johnson City Police Department. Some of our community partners that we bring into the discussion, Frontier Health, First Tennessee Development District, as well as the Johnson City Chamber of Commerce. Now, the local partners that meet, mostly we meet on a monthly basis through the winter months when the services were kind of bombarded with needs of their shelters and that kind of thing. They agreed to set aside a few months, but ARCH, the Appalachian Regional Coalition on Homelessness, the Haven of Mercy, the ETSU Downtown Day Center, the Good Samaritan Ministries, Family Promise, which used to be Interfaith Hospitality, Manna House, Salvation Army, Volunteers of America, which is a veterans services, TC MAC, which is Service for Veterans, Johnson City Police, City of Johnson City, and the Mountain Home Veterans Administration. And so the partner group, that's who consists of the Homeless Task Force. So kind of a brief overview. This year's PIT count, which stands for point in time, was done in January and in a 24-hour period, and those numbers haven't been released yet. So based on last year's the PIT count, I believe the number was about 210, so I'm thinking it's going to be a little bit larger, so 250. Also today, I talked to Bonnie White in Johnson City Schools, works with the homeless. And so this is a group we consider at risk of homelessness, and currently there are 400 students in the Johnson City Schools with no permanent address. It doesn't mean that they're living on the street or in a car, but they have no permanent address. So some of the collective impact of our existing services is 4 organizations provide approximately a total of 200 shelter beds, and these are divided by men, women, families with children, and veterans. And many of these nonprofits, which are really fantastic to work with. So here I am tonight really reporting on their business, their nonprofits, but they're great to work with us. But a lot of them, their funding depends, they might have funding exclusively for veterans or exclusively for families. 3 of the organizations provide daily meals. 2 of them provide 3 meals a day. Some of the other services, you hate to sit in the audience and see you've already got a typo on your presentation, but we have food boxes, laundry services, case management, showers, computer services, mail services, and diapers. Many of the individuals that are living, that are homeless, do draw some sort of disability or SSI, and so we've got a couple of our shelters that are actually their address so they can receive their benefits and all. The ETSU Downtown Day Center, which just had a ribbon cutting on its new 4,000 square foot facility, it also has increased services for medical and mental health services. So I recently surveyed our 9 existing homeless services. 6 of them responded to just really kind of get a snapshot of what are the individuals that they're serving. So they reported back to me about 60% are men, 35–40% are women. 40 to 50% are dealing with mental illness. Most of this data is diagnosable mental illness. 70 to 80% are dealing with drug or alcohol addiction, and certainly with no surprise, 90 to 95% unemployed. And then 20 to 25% that they felt are willing to participate in job skill training or job placement. That the largest reason that they are homeless is just being unemployed. So a couple of action steps. Number 1, I'm working with City Department Community Relationships to produce a little booklet similar to this. It's pocket size. The cover kind of sheds water. It's made with symbols so that if someone's illiterate, they can see where's the knife and fork, where's men's restroom, public restroom, that kind of thing. And we want to get these out, particularly to our downtown merchants. So if they see anyone that's in need, they can up-to-date, accurate information. And we have so many new downtown merchants that we really want them to be educated on where they can send folks really within walking distance for help. Also, the guide provides information and locations to shelter, food, medical care, and more. The Downtown Day Center has a nurse practitioner a couple days a week that you can get free, flu shots, checkups, things like that. And our action step 2, which I'm very excited about, we identified about 20 to 25% that would go back to work with some job skill training. And so borrowing from some lessons learned under the TCCRP when we did the Day Reporting Center, felony offenders with addictions or not, population that was easy to find a lot of jobs. So I'm now in conversation with the First Tennessee Development District, Workforce Development with Chris Craig and Lottie Ryan, as well as the Johnson City Chamber, Brenda Whitson, to create a professional job skill training and job placement program. And one thing we learned when we were working with the reentry population is it was a bit overwhelming to give them a card and tell them about the Tennessee Promise or the how to return to college or even the wonderful facilities in Elizabeth and the technical school, that they needed really smaller bites. And so we found a couple of legitimate professional certifications, the National Retail Federation, Customer Service and Sales Professional Certification, which is suited for all kind of jobs, sales, restaurant, call centers, and then the American Hotel and Lodging Educational Institute Guest Services Gold, which is a training program for the hospitality service. And we, in the reentry program, we did use the retail sales program, and we found that individuals that were working a register at Zaxby's were promoted to a trainer. We had one gentleman that was working at a granite company that went from $9 an hour to $14 an hour after taking this certification. And the beauty of it is you accomplish accomplish it in 40 hours. And there's online testing. I myself am a proctor for the exam because the closest proctoring was Knoxville. So we try to be really resourceful, and we feel like we can bring that to this. And again, another exciting thing is the Chamber has talked to our local hotel and dining, and many of the hotel owners and some restaurant owners are very excited to participate in this program. So the goal would be to do some training, and then to anyone that graduates from the program could then have an interview for a job, as well as resume writing and interview skills. And these are very, very low cost. My goal would be to try to maybe find some grant money or some corporate sponsors, maybe that would even pick up the cost of this. And then additional action steps would be to grow the partnership base for impacting homelessness in Johnson City. We'd like to include more affordable housing partners, corporate care, health care, family, faith community, nonprofits. Our faith community is very caring about the homeless persons, and many times I'll get churches emailing me what can they do, and they help to distribute food, collect food, go down and paint the Salvation Army, as well as our nonprofits. And also we want to continue to identify new funding sources for life rebuilding services. One thing that I've learned in studying about best practices for helping to rebuild the lives of those that are homeless is that it's not just one thing that fixes it. It's not just a shelter, but it's also the life rebuilding. And recently I participated in a webinar on best practices, and they showed Sacramento, Washington, D.C., and Cape Town, South Africa. And I was really encouraged to see that many of the compassionate efforts that we're looking at are heralded as best practices. So our goal overall is to ensure the right blend of proactive services that support an individual in order to avoid and that which is the best case scenario, or to move out of homelessness. Any questions?
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot, Becky. Thank you.
As Janet pointed out, good news on the rating agency review. And Moody's also has done a recent review, and they upheld our AA rating. The only comments in there, I guess, that really caught my attention was the good work, the good financial management, but be cognizant of the amount of debt that you're holding, and be very cognizant of your fund balance. While it looks like you have a really good fund balance in comparison to other cities of our size, we're middle of the pack at best. I think that if we were to get into a dialogue, it would be along the lines of, you really need to work on building your fund balance up bigger than what it is if you want to improve your credit rating any further. Now, I don't say that as a negative statement or gloom and doom. By any means, it's something to be very proud of, but something to be cognizant of as we get further into other discussions about operating budgets and capital budgets.
Like a home inspector, they got to find something, right?
Or the health department or whomever. Yes, sir, exactly.
But good job. That's not easy to do. Upgrades are tough. I've been involved in one and we got turned down, so I know it's tough.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Pete and Janet. You guys have held us in check, and that's a good thing, so thank you.
Any other questions on anything that we've got going on?
I guess I would just want to acknowledge Becky and that effort. You know, one of the things that exists in Johnson City is a lot of disconnected nonprofits serving an at-risk population. I've been on the board of Family Promise, been a volunteer and involved in a number of others. And I think one of the things that your effort has done is encourage something that was instinctively there amongst them, but to better network and recognize that it's not one thing that's going to fix it. It's a combination of factors that become a part of making people individually able to sustain themselves in a way that is healthy, viable, and one that they can feel good about themselves. And I just want to acknowledge her efforts.
I think just to add to that, Commissioner Wise, one of the things Becky's been able to do with having this homeless task force is they've been able to recognize where the duplication of services have existed and where the gaps in services exist. And so those are things now that we can start working on when we recognize that. Temporary housing is probably one of those gaps that we need to spend some effort on. Thank you.
Very good.
Your next order of business is consideration of ordinance number 4658-18, which deals with your Historic Zoning Commission. This is an ordinance to amend Article 6, Historic Quarter Overlay, Historic Conservation Overlay District of the Zoning Code of the City of Johnson City, Tennessee regarding membership requirements. This is for your consideration on second reading.
Very good. Any questions, discussion, comments?
Move for approval.
Second.
That was easy. Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Yeah, it's worth acknowledging what we're doing is essentially making the requirements of serving on this board align more closely with the myriad of other boards and commissions that we appoint to. So it's really just an effort to kind of simplify and streamline what we do across a range of boards and commissions.
That's correct. I think this is identified as a public hearing as well.
Okay.
You did second reading.
I'm sure that's why everybody's here.
Mr.
I bet you Hal's
I'll go
here.
ahead. No, you can't turn down an opportunity, can you? I'll open the public hearing on ordinance 4659-18. Or, nope, wrong one. I'd skipped ahead, sorry. 46, there it is.
58-18.
46.
Yeah.
Like
There.
59. No.
58.
On the one we
Yeah.
just talked about.
Right.
How about that?
Oh, yeah, I'd just like to make a comment on this. I know the
18.
Okay.
previous wording had a definite time period for residency in the city. The Historic Zoning Commission has been unanimous that there need to be some further qualifications other than just being a resident of the city to be on the Historic Zoning Commission. That is supported by the Certified Local Government Guidelines that come out of the Tennessee Historic Commission. And so what you have before you right now, in fact, the section there that says who shall have a demonstrated interest, experience, or knowledge in historic preservation is straight out of those guidelines and in their recommendation for members on historic zoning commissions. So that's where we are. I think this solves a lot of our issues about the time frame and whatever, but still puts some requirement on there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other, would anyone else like to speak? I'll close the public hearing. Do I have a motion?
We did. Didn't we make one?
I did.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was very excited to make that, or somebody did.
I did.
I think they did down there. Everyone was very excited about that one.
I'm all aflutter. Yeah. Okay, Ms. Janet, Ms. Jennings, call the roll. Ms. Janet?
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Brocklin?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock?
Yes.
Mayor Tenino?
Yes.
Your next order of business is consideration of ordinance number 4659-18. An ordinance to amend Title 11 of the Code of the City of Johnson City to enact new provisions for camping on public property and repealing all ordinances and parts of ordinances in conflict herewith is ready for your consideration on second reading.
Mr. Epps?
Are there any questions? This is an ordinance that is taken almost verbatim from state law. It prohibits camping. It prohibits putting down bedding on public property. And that's really the whole purpose of it.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Epps? Okay. Thank you. Okay, so now we come to the point where we will have a public hearing. And one is not required, but it is the belief of this board that if there's citizens that would like to be heard, they need to be heard. So we will open a public hearing. I have a list of folks who have signed up. If you didn't sign up, you'll still have an opportunity to speak. Okay, so but you'll be towards the end. A couple of requests. Number one, there are a lot of people here. A lot of people want to speak. We've got a 3-minute limit. Okay, you'll have 3 minutes to get your point across. So if you want to kind of gather your thoughts and organize with that in mind, please do so. This is also not a discussion about homelessness in general. We will not solve that tonight. Okay, this is about this very specific ordinance. So please keep your comments related to this specific ordinance. You know, we're all here. We all care. We all care. So let's enter with that spirit. And
Mr. Mayor, may I add to that? If someone has already said what you're going to say, you probably don't need to say it too, because we're pretty good listeners, or we'll try to be. So,
yeah. All right. I've lost the list. No particular order. It just happens to be the order that's here on my desk. I have Cynthia Librand. If you'd come to the podium and state your name for the record, please.
Didn't you just state her name?
And I need to open the public hearing.
Well, if I could, I'm only called Cynthia if I'm in trouble with my dad.
You're fine.
So I'll go by Cindy. I appreciate your having us speak to our concerns, and I really appreciate what you presented. I marked out a lot of my questions because there, but for the grace of God, any one of us, most of us, unless you make lots of money, are but 1, 2, 3 paychecks away from financial desperation. So I would oppose this being approved. I would like to see us give this young lady a chance of going forward. She's made significant progress over the, you said 5 years that this group's been together. You've got a medical school or pharmacy school and a nursing school in this area. I've just had to retire from Quillen. I've spent 20 years there. We taught students that we are part of the community and that people matter. And if people matter, if they're having to put bedding down, I would not like to see them arrested, but get people to work to get them off the street, get help. We've got huge amounts of money coming to the state or to the nation on opioid treatment. I think that could solve a lot of the problems. I think you said like 90%. People matter, and we can help them make a difference in their lives. I thank you for the work you do.
Thank you. All right, Zoe Wells.
I'm with Northeast Tennessee Democratic Socialists of America, and we understand that there's a problem, and we don't want downtown business owners and their employees to have to bear the brunt of this problem. We really don't. But what we would like to do is slow things down just a bit to bring folks together and see if we can work out solutions that can benefit everyone, both in the short term and the long run, because once an ordinance is on the books, it's very difficult to get off. And we have all of these people here who are clearly concerned, citizens and downtown business owners and people like Becky, and I think that if we could have a chance to sit down together with people who have a stake and people who are concerned, we could probably come up with a way to resolve the problem that especially a particular small group of homeless people are causing in downtown. We know that the downtown business owners are sympathetic to the plight of the homeless, and they don't want to make their lot more difficult. On our side, we're eager to find ways to rectify the situation in a way that's helpful for all involved. We're simply asking for a short pause on this so we can have a chance to get together and figure out those solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Cindy Young.
First, I have no notes, so I am super nervous about getting up here and talking, but I just wanted to say that 17 years ago, I took in a homeless little girl that was at the Haven of Mercy, and thank God for us being there, or she would be on the streets. And I know the homeless situation in Johnson City is critical, and I so applaud what you're doing. In the winter months, they'll walk. They're freezing. And I see that the initial problem, the biggest problem that we need to have concerning this is a place for them to go. There's lots of places for them to eat, for them to get socks and them to get T-shirts. Our churches and our downtown merchants are wonderful to these people, but they need a place to stay, to keep out of the cold, to keep out of the rain, so that they can try to find a job, be safe. And so I see that is the biggest problem in Johnson City, is having a place for them to, not to call home, but a temporary housing. I know that's got to be very expensive, but certainly, like she said, a pause in this to allow us to come up with a solution to find temporary housing for these folks, I would love to see. Thank you very much, David.
I had the honor of living across the street from Cindy and watching this beautiful young lady grow up. She's awesome. So thank you. Amanda Miller.
Good evening. I am a social worker, and I've worked with homeless populations for the extent of my new career, 1.5 years. And one of my concerns with the ordinance is, one, in the second reading, I don't know if in the third reading it will have it available what the penalties will be for violating this ordinance. Several cities in the past 6 or 7 years have passed ordinances like this only for them to be found as violations of human rights, because it criminalizes homelessness into a way. And in that sense as well, when this person is picked up, if the penalty were to be fines or jail time for these situations, that's going to further perpetuate that cycle for those individuals, because they will be knocked out of the ability to rent certain places with further criminal records. It's not going to do any good for these individuals. While I agree that there are problems that need to be resolved with, especially with downtown business owners, I feel this would be negligent on us to, and would not benefit the individuals who it would impact. Also stated, the Department of Justice found it unconstitutional on some of these passings if there were not enough beds available per homeless. As per your thing, 250, and that's a rough estimate because point in times are not, they're just estimates, ballpark figures. They're not fully representative of how many there are. 250, but we have 200 bed spaces available. So this could be found, if brought to court, unconstitutional.
Kristen Watts. Of course, the last seat in the last row, yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for having, allowing people the chance to speak. I'm also with the DSA. I'm extremely concerned about how vague this reads to me, and also how it's going to be enforced. To me, I imagine this being enforced very inequitably to people of color, to people who fit the bill as looking criminal in some capacity, and also it seems to me like this sort of thing is also covered or potentially covered by other rules. Like, it keeps getting characterized as people sleeping in the middle of sidewalks, in front of doors, and obstructing things, but the ordinance is worded for all public property, right, for parks, things like that, that are the safest place to be if you can't get into a shelter, if there's some kind of problem with that. I know that the wait time for public housing can often be up to a year. I'm extremely concerned about this. I think it can put a lot of people in, legitimate harm's way. There are constitutional issues with it, and I want to know what the cost to the city is going to be to put people in jail every single day for sleeping in a way that really shouldn't bother anyone in a park or something like that. Should really spur us into action to help people even more. And the resources to put people into jail and to perpetuate that cycle could much, much, much better be applied to better services. And I really hope that's the direction that this goes.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Dennis Prater.
Hi, Dennis Prater. I'm a candidate for Washington County Commission, District 9, and I'm here to ask people to vote against this ordinance because I think there are some legitimate concerns that do need to be addressed and heard in a creative manner from that the downtown business owners have, that I've heard about. But we also have to think about our whole community, and that does include homeless people as well. So, if you have someone who has very little and you take even that away, you take something else away from them and don't give them something in return, what do you call that, right? It doesn't sound good. I believe, though, that we can take this moment, and if we slow down and get together with the various stakeholders, I believe we can come up with a solution to the issue that we, as Johnson City, can be proud of. And that's what I would like to see. I would like us to see a solution that we can be actually proud of, and we can be a model for other people. And there are a lot of ideas out there about that I believe can be explored. So, thanks.
And Whitney Prater.
We need more space between the chairs.
Would be helpful when we renovate the chambers.
Hi, thank you for having this public hearing, and I am one of the co-chairs of Northeast Tennessee DSA. And to talk, what I wrote about was actually mentioned earlier about the constitutionality of this, about is this ordinance even legal? According to American Criminal Law Review, courts often have found that laws prohibiting basic behaviors necessary for the survival of homeless individuals violate those individuals' rights against cruel and unusual punishment. In Pottinger versus the City of Miami, a group of homeless individuals brought suit against the City of Miami to enjoin law enforcement from upholding ordinances against eating, sleeping, and performing other life-sustaining activities in public. It was found that their status as homeless was involuntary and beyond their immediate ability to alter, and that they couldn't, and that the conduct they were arrested and criminalized for was involuntary to their status. More than a decade later, in Joan versus the City of Los Angeles, the ACLU representing 6 homeless people found an ordinance against sleeping, sitting, or laying down in public to be a violation of the 8th Amendment. These are just a few of the cases that are similar to this ordinance and have been found to be unconstitutional. The cost of this to the City of Miami was $900,000 in legal battles, and they lost. So the question is, you're trying to pass an ordinance that might not be legal. It could be against the Constitution of America, not just the state of Tennessee. It's against America. And so if you're passing something that's unconstitutional, that's going to cost the city more money because while it's going through, you're putting people in jail instead of getting to the root causes of homelessness, which could be addiction, or it could be whatever, it could be whatever. Instead of getting to those root causes, you're criminalizing people who need a hand up and not to be pushed back down. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Christian Brooks.
Hi, I'm also a member of Northeast Tennessee DSA. I just recently moved to Johnson City from St. Petersburg, Florida. And as a youth, I spent a lot of time hanging out on the streets. And while I wasn't homeless per se, I spent a lot of time, I spent many nights without a place to stay. And I was in a city where homelessness is criminalized and where they come up with creative ways like this ordinance to criminalize homelessness rather than addressing the issue. And, you know, today I am working in retail. I have a family, a kid on the way, and I'm pursuing a career in nursing, right? If I had been picked up in the militarized city of St. Petersburg for sleeping outside as a kid and direct filed as an adult, which they do in Florida, all of that possibility of contribution to this community would be gone, right? And those are the kind of outcomes that I saw happen to people that I knew, people in the homeless community in St. Pete, or youths just happened to stay out on the streets every once in a while. You know, that lives have been devastated by the implementation of ordinances like this, right? Not that Johnson City is as militarized as St. Petersburg, but just any steps in that direction, I think that we should be very cautious about that. That's all I have to say.
And Whitney Bowman.
I was sort of hoping I wouldn't get called.
Well, you don't have to. It's, you know.
No, I've been fighting seizures all week, and I'm not prepared at all. But I will say, bear with me. I will say, I don't think this is a very good ordinance. I was homeless for 2.5 years. When you have to carry all your stuff, you need to set it down. I have seizures if I don't sleep, so you got to catch a nap. But one time I was trying to go to the Salvation Army to sleep, and they got a time rule. Now, I didn't know that because I had a really good life before I got sick, before I got my brain injury. I didn't know that. So I slept in a parking lot downtown in the light because my mom said, stay in the light, stay in the light. When I was in the dark, that's when I would get beat. I don't think this is a very good ordinance, and I think you guys can come up with something way better. So them saying just pause for a second, just think about it just for a second. We don't have to pass this. We can come up with something better. I really think we could come up with something better. And I hope that you guys listen. As a past homeless person, this hurts my feelings right here because I don't have anywhere to go. She talks about, and you did a good job, she talks about like the day center. Well, people shoot up at the day center, you know. I don't want to, at the river you can go wash your clothes for $0.25, you could take a shower. And the showers are so gross. One day you could wake up and everything changed just like mine did. And instead of your nice bed that you go and sleep in and your beautiful shower, because after you're homeless, showers are beautiful, could not be there tomorrow. And stuff like this is not looking out for people that aren't chronically homeless. We don't want to stay on the street. We want to get better. And I have my own spot now. But Good Samaritan, they didn't have anything for me. They didn't have anything there. Sometimes they don't have beds. And you know what? Sometimes they have bed bugs. And you know, if you catch bed bugs, all your stuff's got to go away. You're going to wash all that. You hear people crying when you lay in there and you're sleeping in the bunk. Is that where you want to go? We should have better places for people to stay. Not kick them and try and hide them away. Don't hide us. Don't hide us. Help us. And thank you for listening to us. And thank you for listening to all of us. I hope that went well.
Thank you. That's all I've got. So if I didn't call your name, well, I don't have those.
Yes, he does. He does want that list.
Yeah. All right, Kate? Sorry, Kate Craig.
There's always too many Kates in the room, so yeah, it's a common name. But yes, my name's Kate Craig, and I'm the chair of the Washington County Democratic Party. Thank you for taking the time to listen to us. Homelessness is an issue that plagues many communities, but the people who suffer the most are the homeless population, those who are homeless themselves. These are people who have lost everything. These are people who go without food, shelter, access to medical care, and have been shunned by society. Most people look away from anyone who is homeless to spare their own comfort. This proposed ordinance is a mistake and will have horrendous repercussions if passed. Everyone here on both sides of this issue believe that the issue of homelessness needs to be addressed. No one believes ignoring the issue is the right way forward. Where we disagree are the next steps. This ordinance would automatically other every member of the homeless population, a population we are all one job loss, one medical catastrophe from being ourselves. This ordinance would no longer treat people who are homeless with any amount of human dignity. While I do know that local partnerships with local organizations that provide services have been part of the dialogue, but they're sadly not part of this ordinance. And if these collective services and partnerships, as well as the additional services that are desperately needed, are implemented, this ordinance is grossly unnecessary. In fact, this ordinance would have several negative outcomes, which would include keeping people from the access to these resources. It was pointed out to me today that the Salvation Army has 60 available beds. And in that same conversation, I said that if I were homeless today, I would actually be turned away from the Salvation Army because I'm gay. The Salvation Army, as a national and local, their policy is to not serve LGBT people. And so the greater point is that this isn't a black and white issue. It's not one bed per person in the sense of there's all these other caveats that go with it. It should also be noted that addiction was cited earlier as something that plagues the homeless population across the state regarding those who need access to treatment centers, and that sadly only 10% of those who need access to those centers have space in those beds. From 2005 to 2006, I worked for Second Harvest Food Bank in Northeast Tennessee. It was my second job out of college, and in fact that's where I met Mayor Tomita. He was president of the board during that time. During my time there, I was part of conducting the 2006 hunger study that measured hunger and poverty across our nation and across our region as well. As the other employees of the food bank already knew, and I quickly learned, that addressing this issue is nuanced. Addressing this issue has to be rooted in compassion rather than criminalization. While I know that there are task force meetings on homelessness, it's not well publicized in terms of for all of us to be there to be part of the solution. And we want to be part of that. And it's also my understanding that the first reading and even coming to this reading that not all of the data about the homeless population that's going on or that affects the homeless here has been released, and as was pointed out, that all we have is 2007, the data from previous years. So I'm curious why we're moving forward on an ordinance without having all the data behind it. I'm asking the commissioners today to table any further readings of this ordinance, take it back to a task force where all the stakeholders are sought out and present before a solution is then proposed. And that solution should treat everyone with the dignity they deserve. That solution should be collaborative with the goal of helping everyone, local business owners, and especially our homeless population. Thank you.
Thank you. Debbie McClaskey.
Well, good evening. There's been a lot of wonderful things said, and I've looked through my list, but I have a few things left that haven't been talked about. So, my name is Debbie McClaskey. I'm a faculty member at East Tennessee State University, and I'm also a candidate for the Tennessee Democratic Party Executive Committee woman. And I am very concerned about the unintended consequences of passing this ordinance. Many, many things have been mentioned and related in relationship to that, but I want to add a couple more. One is the huge gathering of leaders from across the region. About 800 or so gathered in Greenville just a week ago at the Niswonger Center. Jenny, I saw you there. looking at issues of poverty. And these issues, this ordinance connects directly to that. I realize we all want a wonderful business environment downtown, and nobody here hasn't enjoyed the wonderful rebirth of Johnson City. However, we can't do it at the expense of folks who are having difficulty. And as a faculty member at East Tennessee State University, I want to share with you that we have a lot of students who are one financial aid check away from being one of those individuals on the sidewalk or in the park. And in fact, some of those folks could be them right now. A lot of recent studies in the Chronicle of Higher Education about how our higher ed students are struggling, and they are. I hear them, I work with them. I've been at East Tennessee State for over 30 years. I see it, I hear it. We can't close our eyes to that. We are home base to a wonderful institution and others nearby, Northeast State, Milligan College, Tusculum on the other side of us. We have to do things that don't criminalize folks who are down on their luck. Thank you.
Thank you. And Joseph Rash.
First off, thank you for recognizing all of us, both of us that agree and disagree with this. As a person who was brought here in 1993 by my parents and my grandparents, both of whom were professors with the Quillen College of Medicine, they were actually brought here by Dr. Stanton to help form the Quillen College of Medicine, and one of the things that they loved about this area was the open, welcoming attitude of the economic structure, the government structure that easily put them into houses up in Scholar Holler of Seminole Woods, gave them the opportunity to teach the incoming graduates to become future doctors, with which we can now be proud of for the millions of dollars that it brings this area. And if they were alive today, I think they would be thoroughly against this as I am, because in 1993 and early 1994, my mother had divorced my dad, so we ended up becoming homeless on the run, utilizing these local services that the task force director had mentioned, including the Salvation Army, as well as one of the last families that actually had an opportunity to stay at the Haven of Mercy. So I got to see firsthand some of these issues surrounding homelessness, staying at the old Economy Inn before it was raised for the new public library, literally seeing the tail end as what we now enjoy of the city. Now, it's great to beautify the city, but that unfortunately has left this gap that has been mentioned by the task force numbers. And I'm glad that that information is being studied. That's a great use, because it also reduces crime. And I would say this ordinance actually countermines everything she's doing with her task force. And that's unfortunate, because I would like to see more agencies not be scared off that if they get involved in helping the homeless, that it's possible that the people they're helping the very next day could end up in jail or criminalized, and thus could not even receive grant money because their numbers are now adjusted as to who is considered homeless. And the similar issue is with people who are drunk but not homeless. I'm glad to say that most of the officers are well trained and not just automatically criminalizing those people. So I would like a greater understanding of how this would be enforced, how would it affect the city's cultural viewpoint from external sources, and would it make an embarrassment of us? And thankfully, I was able to go from this homeless situation to the government housing sector, work at the Firehouse Restaurant, join the military, and all these things, most of which would not have been able to happen had I just stayed in jail just a couple times as a young teen and then eventually an adult. And it would be unfortunate to see more people, because I've, as mentioned previously, I've talked to students who were at Science Hill or at ETSU who had to live in what used to be the gazebo in Majestic Park that's now been taken away, that used to stay underneath the breezeway archway that's now taken away, that's now, they stay at the pavilion at Founders Park, and then there's pictures posted stigmatizing them, and this ordinance only further stigmatizes and makes a mockery of people who happen to be homeless, some of which are because they time out from the domiciliary at the VA, or because they just cannot handle, either due to PTSD or other mental illness, they cannot stand being around a group of people in a forced situation. They would rather be out in the open underneath a bridge or at Founders Park, and they're not getting in the way of people, and there's already laws dealing with right away with the fire marshal codes. So I just hope that it's considered what this would do with the viewpoint of Johnson City, because there's already been national stories of the Salvation Army, as previously mentioned, that was nationally publicized and really made a sham of what the Salvation Army provides. I would like that they would overturn that, but obviously it's a national organization. So I would like more solutions before putting this out there and categorizing people as just merely homeless and thus dehumanizing them. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Okay, now that's all I have. Have I missed anybody? Very good. Thank you for coming down. Thank you for speaking your mind, your heart. We appreciate it very much.
Mr. Mayor, is there anyone else who wishes to speak who may or may not have signed in on any of the sheets?
Okay, come on. Well, okay. Come on up, state your name. All right.
My name's Brooke Bailey. I've lived in Johnson City for 10 years, and I honestly didn't really plan on staying that long, but I like it here. The progress that the downtown merchants in the city have made have been great. It's amazing to see that. But one frequent complaint I see about downtown is there's nowhere to park. And that's true on a Friday or Saturday night. I'm down there 2 or 3 nights a week. A lot of the businesses that I frequent, it's standing room only sometimes, or you can't even get into them. You know, an hour wait for a table is not unusual. So I question, who is this ordinance for? Who is it hurting? If you sweep the problem under the rug or out of downtown, is it really going to bring more people in? I mean, I don't see that necessarily. And it's also going to push them to another part of the city, or push them out where maybe they're not as safe or they're not being, you know, cared for as well. A lot of the organizations that serve them are downtown. So I, as a, I guess, a proponent of all the small businesses downtown and a champion, I tell people to go there. I would just hope you would think about that. Is it really hurting people and keeping them out of downtown? Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Come on up. If you want to go ahead, if you're towards the end of the rows, if you want to come ahead and work your way up and sit up here in the front, please be welcome to do that. It's not easy to get out of that last seat, yeah.
I didn't actually plan on speaking. My name is Sydney Crowder. I'm the vice chair of the Washington County Democratic Party and in my second year of the MPA program at ETSU. At the start of this public hearing, you talked about how you wanted to hear about criticisms of the ordinance and not criticism of homelessness and how we're not going to solve that tonight, and I think that's fair. But in reading the ordinance, as I did just a couple of minutes ago, I noticed that it talks about camping, and who are we talking about if we're not talking about the homeless? I don't really think that it's fair to say that we can't talk about homelessness in regard to this ordinance when the ordinance is only focusing on those that are homeless. ETSU students can camp out on ETSU property. They're not coming to downtown to do it. I also think that having been in the MPA program for so long, that there are other solutions. Cities have done them. They've done them well, and they've gotten a lot of recognition from it, and it's going to bring in a lot more people to find a good solution and be a model city for other people to look at and to understand and to imitate, rather than saying, hey, instead of doing something, we're going to push them out and send them somewhere else. And since we started off the meeting with an invocation, I think that we might want to turn back to that and look at the book of Matthew, anywhere in the book of Matthew, and see what would have been done otherwise. Because I think that not taking care of our citizens, even the residents of Johnson City who are down on their luck, is really unfair to them and unfair to the Christian values that we seem to imitate around here. Thank you all so much for this public meeting.
My name's Gerald Fry, and I appreciate your time. I know you didn't have to do this, as you said, and I'll be as brief as I can. I want to highlight a couple things that were kind of mentioned in passing, but I think deserve a little bit more attention. I didn't bring facts and figures, but I can to the next meeting if necessary. One of the things that happens when these sorts of ordinances are passed that are pretty quick to find are hidden costs. Costs of policing, costs of jailing people, the whole cost to the city of dealing with this, trying to criminalize the living of homeless people. What we also then run into that's been noted in other cities, kind of like you mentioned, is that now that people have a criminal record, it's that much harder to get them out of the cycle. We heard the great example of how difficult it was to get people into jobs at that point. That's another hidden cost. You will have to continue to deal with that into the future, actually making the problem worse. I think I'd also like to tell a personal story or someone's personal story. An example of homelessness that is not even being considered or would not show up in any data here that's been mentioned. I have a friend that is an engineer that was homeless. My friend returned home on a Sunday night at midnight to find his apartment empty. The landlord had gone in and found Pride paraphernalia. I'm getting the word wrong. Anyway, Pride material, LGBT Pride material. The landlord had particular opinions about that, emptied the apartment out over the weekend, so my friend returned home to an empty apartment. That person was lucky enough to have someone to stay with. Otherwise, he would have been sleeping in a car and under this bill arrested and had a criminal record and then lost his job. This is not a healthy environment. I know everybody means well, but we can do better than this. Thank you.
David?
Sure, why not? David Reed. I grew up here in Johnson City, left for many years, lived in suburban Atlanta, where the viewpoint of a homeless person was somebody that just stood out on the corner and panhandled money, and that's what suburban Atlanta thinks a homeless person is. I moved back here to take care of my mom. Searching for a job, I volunteered at Good Sam, and it changed my life. It seriously changed my life. Getting to hear the stories, standing next to people that worked there at Good Sam as their only source of revenue, income, the things I found out tore me up. All the red tape it takes for anybody that's homeless to utilize some of these services that we talk about that are so available is insurmountable to some of these people. It is almost impossible for some after they've exhausted their first chance to do this. With that, I volunteered to be on the board of the Community Health Center, and that's where I saw you last, David. I go there every Friday, well, when I can, take bagels from Wheeler's Bagels. I own Cranberries, by the way. That has nothing to do with this, but they see me come into Wheeler's Bagels to get their day-olds to take to the homeless center. But while I'm there, I get to talk to some of the people, and it is just gut-wrenching. All the little things that only the homeless seem to know about how to make things work in this area. I just ask that we try to not make it even harder for them. So with that, I'd like to close, if I'm the last one, hint, hint. Since we opened in prayer, Sydney, you stole my line, but 1 John 3:17. But if anyone has the world's goods and sees his brother in need, yet closes his heart against him, how does God's love abide in him? Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? No. No, I'm kidding.
Sit down, Jim.
Do we, is there anyone else who would like to speak? Then we'll close the public hearing. Okay.
I just want to clarify one thing. In the newspaper, it talked about arrest. Violation of this ordinance doesn't result in arrest. It can't. It is called a civil fine. It's not even a criminal fine. It's called a civil fine. And the enforcement is done by citation into municipal court, which is a civil record. It would not be a criminal record at all if it were to come about. Just wanted to make sure you all knew that.
It's like a parking ticket.
Yeah,
Well,
it really is.
while you're at the podium, would you speak to some of the questions about the constitutionality question?
Yeah, I have researched the constitutionality of this, and there's been no challenge to it on the state level, the same language, no construction of it in any courts. But the cases that I have seen, and I have seen several that were mentioned here tonight, talk about making it criminal to sleep in public is really what it comes down to. This ordinance doesn't make it criminal to sleep in public. It says it's a civil violation. It's a fine if you put down bedding, if you put down, do structures for camping. But there is a distinction between that and sleeping in public that is important, because if somebody happens to be in a park and falls asleep in the grass while they're on a picnic, well, that, it would be ridiculous to say they were sleeping in public, and that would be something that would violate an ordinance. That's why those cases came about. They were too broad. They were looked at as just being too widespread. So the state of Tennessee put language down here that I used that is a lot narrower in what it's supposed to do.
Well, if sleeping in public would get you a criminal record, I've seen all kinds of people destined for that in church.
Right. But thank goodness that's not on public property.
All right. True.
Yeah, but
Not
I see
at Central Baptist, though.
That's right. They don't
Yeah.
sleep there.
Yeah.
But anyhow, I just wanted to make it, and sure, somebody could challenge it, and we could find out that it is,
The
outside
language that
Constitution.
you've used is the state language. How long has it been on the books?
Since 2012.
Okay.
We've closed the public hearing now. I'm sorry.
So anyhow, and if you all have any questions, I'll answer.
If I have no money and I'm homeless, how do I pay that fine? And then what
Sorry, we've closed our public hearing. We gave everybody a chance to speak, so. No, I'm sorry. Thank you. All right. Any discussion?
Mayor, I want to make a couple of comments, I think. Appreciate the admonition to consider John in the book of Matthew. Certainly struggle with my responsibilities as a leader in this community, balanced against people's rights and balanced against the issues of homelessness. I appreciate everybody's comments this evening. Certainly would encourage those of you who view this as a hugely important issue to get together with Vicki Haas and see where you might fit into what the task force is doing. You obviously have some resolve to address this issue, and we can use good ideas and try to make some impact in this problem. Everybody has rights. Those who are the less fortunate in our society, as well as those who are landowners and business owners. But the landowners and business owners have no less rights than those who are homeless. And those of us who choose to try to help a community to be successful have to weigh the rights, whether they're relative or absolute, and the impact that those actions of various parties have when there's an insistence on pursuing what they consider to be within their rights. And that's the charge of everybody up here is to try to understand, to try to balance those things, and try to understand that just because somebody has what they consider to be a right, it may have a negative impact on somebody else. And, you got to look at it from both sides. When I ran for commission in 2011, the downtown was an absolute disaster. It was dead. And one of my 4 promises as a candidate at that point was that I would work actively and aggressively towards vitalizing our downtown. As your mayor, I pushed hard to see that an investment was made in downtown to make it an asset for Johnson City rather than a decaying eyesore. I was fortunate to work with commissioners both when I started and this commission as well, who saw the importance in our downtown and have done the things that need to occur to help that area of our community succeed. To that end, when issues come to the fore that can impede progress for the community as a whole, I have to try to seek a solution as a commissioner. And this ordinance is certainly a way of addressing a real problem that we have. This ordinance is purposefully limited, and it's certainly not intended to be discriminatory. It does nothing that reduces the opportunity for any demographic, homeless included, to avail themselves of our downtown in either the daylight hours or after dark. The ordinance definitely does not address homelessness, and that's not been our intent with this, and we hope that you will be engaged in trying to help address that issue. I don't think there's anybody up here sitting at this docket that would not like to see that issue addressed. I don't think there's anybody sitting at this docket who is not supportive of the efforts that Becky has been making along these lines. And in fact, these efforts are not new, and that says you're not going to have an overnight solution to the problem. We recognize that. You need to recognize it as well, because we have a definite problem downtown for our merchants in particular that we need to address. As a commission, it is our responsibility to help address that. So perhaps it's a short-term solution to a problem that has much bigger ramifications, a problem that is much broader, but it's something that we have to consider as a commission. It's our intention through this, even though it does impact maybe one group of people more than the other, that it not be discriminatory. It is our intention, however, that it allows an opportunity for our merchants to make a living where that's being impeded, for families to enjoy the parks and amenities that their taxpayer dollars have built, and for customers to find the downtown environment welcoming and becoming. So I feel this is a very narrow thing. I don't think it's intended to be discriminatory towards the homeless. I do think that it is necessary for us as a commission to try to ensure continued success in the revitalization of our downtown and to try to ensure that our citizenry has the opportunity to enjoy it. And for that reason, I certainly will support this ordinance on second and third readings. Again, I appreciate everybody's comments. I understand your comments, and I'm not unsympathetic. I've been on Good Sam's board. I made cash contributions through that whole period of time to them to help to try to address these types of issues. So I'm not unsympathetic, but I've got a problem that I've got to try to take care of and take on, and this is a way for us to take care of a true issue in our downtown.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I'm not done thinking.
Well,
but I've been accused.
How long do we need to give you?
Yeah, no. I don't know. I'll let the others.
Anyone else?
Commissioner Van Brockman, I think you've stated it very well in terms of the way I feel about it too. Our responsibility as well is to make sure that the public facilities in a city is kept for its intended use, for its intended purposes. We find, and they weren't designed for camping and all the stuff that goes along with that. I know, and perhaps Mr. Peterson can comment on this a little bit further, but there are just some health issues that occur when we have numerous people camping in certain spots on our sidewalks. It's a health and safety issue as well, and it's not a healthy and safe place for the people who are camping there also. So I'm going to support this, but I also support absolutely everything that we can do to help get people in Johnson City, Tennessee out of homelessness. And so sometimes the path to get there may not seem like the right path, but we are committed to doing that. I think you can see from Ms. Haas's report, I attend these meetings. I'm very committed personally to doing this, but we also have to represent the broader public and our downtown merchants and everyone who are our taxpayers who this property belongs to as well. And so I'm going to support it on second and third reading as well.
Commissioner Fowler? Are you finished thinking?
Never. I struggle a little bit because I think the entire conversation ends up being heads and tails, and it's not about heads and tails. It's the homeless or the merchants. Well, it's not about the homeless or the merchants. It's about all of Johnson City and the greater good. And I struggle because we end up talking about, well, if we pass this ordinance, it's because we've chosen not to find workable solutions. This ordinance isn't the alternative to workable solutions. This ordinance deals with a very specific problem that is not specifically the homeless, but it certainly is a major factor in it. And so whether we're talking about the person who wants to live downtown and get up in the morning and go jog down the street and doesn't want to have to trip over sleeping bags, they have a reasonable expectation to use the public right-of-way in that way. Whether we're talking about the person who wants to go visit the coffee shop or the barber shop or whatever other establishment may be anywhere in town, but let's be honest, what we're talking about is largely in the city core. They have a right to go to that establishment without having the public right-of-way impeded. And so I struggle because there seems to be this notion that it's some act of mercy to allow the most vulnerable people in our community to sleep on the sidewalk. And I think nothing could be further from the truth. And while I recognize that there are specific pockets of need, and I recognize that there are unique demographics that are some better. I served on the board of Family Promise. Our primary interest, our primary area of service was to families in homelessness because we didn't want to separate mothers and fathers and children. But there were others. The Haven of Mercy was primarily dealing with homeless men. But across these different networks are organizations doing what they can. That doesn't mean they're doing everything that could be done. But this ordinance isn't doing everything that could be done. And for that reason, because I think we have to look at the big picture and we have to recognize this isn't an either or, perhaps it's a both and question, I will be voting for this on second and third reading.
Very good. Any further discussion, comments? Do we have a motion?
Move approval.
Have a motion. A second.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Ms. Jennings, call the roll, please.
I think I will pass and vote later.
Commissioner Van Brockman?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock?
Yes.
Mayor Tomita?
Yes.
Commissioners, this brings you to the close of your business on this agenda.
Any comments?
Do you need a motion to adjourn?
Nope. I can do that. This meeting's adjourned.
Okay.